Welcome, one and all Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, who are you?
Who are you?
I don't even recognize you anymore. You're a psychologist, right?
I am. I do a show. It's called the Arkham Sessions.
Do you? Do you do the show?
This is a weekly podcast dedicated to this.
Is it? It is. That's what I heard. I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere, and I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm feeling really good. I got to tell you, this is my happy place. It's been a rough month of scheduling or so for us, between your work and my work, and things are really ramping up for me as we gear toward Comic-Con.
And WonderCon, which is just around the corner.
Well, I'm not even talking about stuff we're doing. I'm talking about stuff that I'm doing for work. So,
who cares about what I'm doing?
Well, it's been insane. I mean, you've been crazy busy. I've been crazy busy. We have finally gotten an opportunity to sit down and talk about this episode that we've been promising for a long time. And
it's a great follow-up to our last episode, which was all about the process of understanding anxiety and fear and how to treat and manage anxiety and fear.
Yeah, let's talk about that episode. Let's set that up a little bit, because it was something that we weren't expecting to do. And then all of a sudden, you were given an opportunity to talk to Sam Humphries, the writer of Green Lantern. You don't necessarily have to go into how that all came about, because I know that you did an intro and outro to the last show. Which I recorded 25 times. We can't all be one-take wonders. It was great, and I missed being a part of it, but I think that episode exemplified what this show is about. Mm-hmm. And, we don't do interviews. We don't typically do a lot of interviews because you are the focus of the show. It's the psychology of these characters. The only times we really want to talk to other people are when we know they have focused on the psychology of those characters. Otherwise, we just become any other Batman podcast. But this was a really great experience to listen to Sam talk about his anxiety and the way that he's coped with it, and the way that he was able to write it into this comic. Drea, looking back, in the weeks since you had that opportunity, what does that episode mean for you?
I think it's really important, and I can tell because of the feedback and the responses that we have received since that episode aired, and a lot of those responses, and we do get some emails, and we do get a few notes, and we have an IMZ page, we have a Facebook page, we have various ways in which people can communicate with us, and I know that we do hear from people quite frequently. But this was a little different. We heard from folks who had specific examples of their own situations and histories of anxiety and panic attacks. Mm-hmm. And they reached out and they appreciated hearing from somebody who not only went through a difficult time related to anxiety and panic, but also discussed how he overcame those different feelings and emotions, and how he learned to cope with them. And I think it was a great chance for us to step away a little bit from the characters that we talk about with the animated series. And for once, it's not Batman who's on the couch, so to speak, but we really kind of extend our approach to other people who have wonderful stories and who have wonderful things to teach us. So I was really delighted to get some very positive responses and some follow-up questions, and I would love to do it some more. I think that it could be beneficial for us to take some moments to speak with people who could really offer up a lot of education and again, their own histories and their experiences that could bring some of what we're talking about to light and make it very real.
Yeah, and it couldn't have happened at a better time, because we are doing an episode that is the perfect follow-up to that episode, and that, of course, is Never Fear. Drea, because we've been away for so long, frankly, I want to get right into this episode, if that's okay. That and because I'm just really excited to talk about the Scarecrow again. It's the first time we have seen this character in the new Batman adventures. I have a question that I want to pose to you, and I know it's not necessarily something that you can answer right off the bat, but I thought it would be a fun question. Obviously, as with so many of the other characters, the Scarecrow has gone through a big physical transition, transformation in this series. He is significantly more menacing than he had been in the past. He's actually wearing a noose around his neck. Not something that you typically see with the Scarecrow.
I think that was a bold move to draw him like that. You don't often see that kind of image coupled with a terrifying person. You know, like it's usually kind of comical, but here it's very straightforward, and it's kind of horrific.
Yeah, he's gone from looking like a Scarecrow to more like almost a Western Grim Reaper type. I mean, it's not Scarecrow. And I find myself wondering, because now he is voiced by the great Jeffrey Combs. If people are familiar with the Reanimator film, there's also, he played Ratchet in Transformers Prime. He was in one of my favorite films, The Frighteners, that Peter Jackson directed with Michael J. Fox. He's a fantastic actor, fantastic voice actor, and is doing a great job here as the Scarecrow, but he's not the same voice that we had come up with. He's not the same look. He is significantly bigger, broader shouldered, not nearly as thin and frail looking as...
Well, he doesn't look like a guy that's dressed up as a Scarecrow. He looks like a supernatural character.
Yeah, so I have to ask, do you think this is Jonathan Crane?
I think it is supposed to be Jonathan Crane, but he's transformed. Clearly, he's not been to the dentist in a very long time.
Well,
his teeth are just alone.
His whole face. He has a
skull. He has like a skull.
Yeah.
For a face.
Yeah.
So yes, it's very Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a, why am I blanking on that Western character from the animated series?
Oh, Jonah Hex?
Yeah, he's a little bit Jonah Hex, a little bit Solomon Grundy, a little bit Jonathan Crane.
You know what? I don't disagree with you when it comes to like the Jonah Hex and the Solomon Grundys and that, but I don't see an inch, an ounce, a millimeter, any level of quantification of Jonathan Crane. Jonathan Crane was more scientific. He was more, there was something about it. He was a bit mousier. He was treated like a victim who wanted to get back at people for different things. Like Jonathan Crane didn't seem like this character. This is a character that is basically taking the same sorts of toxins that the Joker might have used, and he's going to spread it throughout Gotham City, but he's not doing it for money, and he's certainly not doing it for laughs.
And he's not doing it for scientific advancement, which is what the Jonathan Crane character we came to love would be curious about. As we unfold the story, we'll learn more about what he's doing here in this particular episode, but it's about control. It's about terrorizing the city. It's about getting what he wants, but it's not about learning more about the psychology or biology of anxiety and fear, which is what typically had motivated him in the past.
Yeah.
And doesn't provide us any scientific advancement, which was in a grandiose way what he felt he was responsible for, what he felt his role was.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. His character here is a more simplified villain, and his motivations are straightforward, but don't really fall in line. I don't really see the alignment with a previous Jonathan Crane,
right,
Scarecrow character that we're used to.
Yeah, he's almost like he has taken over the mantle of the Scarecrow, and he is giving it a more legitimate meaning. You are absolutely terrified of this character as he comes out of the shadows wearing a noose, looking like, the logo from the Misfits. I mean, it's a terrifying look. I like it, but it doesn't seem like Jonathan Crane to me.
I agree with you on that.
Let's talk about the episode here. Basically, it starts out in the city. We've got some citizens of Gotham who are out on the streets. And this sort of goes to my point that I always try to make, which is that Batman, you're talking about a terrifying character like the new Scarecrow. The antithesis of that, apparently, is Batman. Batman does not instill fear into anyone because the citizens of Gotham see someone flying through the streets on a line similar to the bat rope, and everyone is more in awe of, oh, there he is. Oh, I see him. Who's that, mommy? Oh, that's just the Batman. Like, no one... I
didn't even think about that.
No one cares.
It's almost as if this episode subverts the idea of Batman as the character or the hero who is supposed to instill fear in everybody.
Yeah. He wants to be scary, but the little kid and the mom are like, oh, it's Batman.
It's like a show.
Yeah, it's not scary to anyone, and I think that's a problem. If you're going to be a crime-fighting vigilante, maybe you want to be terrifying to the criminals. Now, one could argue that Batman's not trying to terrify the kids and their moms.
But if you can't terrify a kid, how are you going to
terrify the criminal?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It's problematic.
It turns out that this person swinging through the streets, though, is not actually Batman. He's a gentleman a little on the hefty side. How he was mistaken for Batman, I don't know. But he is certainly not afraid to fly through the air the way that Batman does. Batman and Robin see him and go after him. They don't catch up to him before there is a heinous accident, and he flies into a neon sign, knocking part of it loose, and Batman and Robin have to save the day by using their bat ropes to catch this neon sign piece. What I couldn't help but notice was the feeling of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, because our overweight friend who is not accustomed to doing this kind of thing is hanging from the side of the building while they do this.
I think it's important to note that he's not scared.
He not scared.
On the ledges of buildings, he's running around. He's euphoric. In my notes, I had a few words that said manic ? Because he was almost so confident and so euphoric to the point that it was kind of upsetting. It was kind of disturbing that he had no fear at all about being at the very tops of these buildings and being near death.
Even as he's hanging, you would think that he does appear to be in distress to some degree, but it's not a fear of falling. It's more of a, I can't get up and I want to get up onto this high.
Right, so I can run around some more and be excited.
Batman and Robin end up saving him after they've done everything else. And Batman tries to escort him off the building. Take a listen.
Window? I'm not going in. This is going to be the best night of my life.
It could also be the last.
Oh, come on. There's nothing to be afraid of. Fear's a prison, you see. And I've just broken out.
So fear is the prison, and he's just broken out. Let's talk about that. This guy has been gassed He has been given something that has completely removed his fear. This guy was afraid of heights and clearly isn't anymore. Drea, instantly, what are your thoughts? Do you still continue with the manic?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Once I learned that he was given some kind of drug that reduced his fear to nothing, it makes sense that he's euphoric and risky. And it's important to note that, because while he says that he's no longer imprisoned by his fear, and we can suppose that maybe his fear of heights was so extreme that it was a phobia, it was interfering with his functioning, it was bringing him down, it was causing him distress. Once that's lifted, you're going to expect this elation, this sense of almost this invulnerability, this sense that he can do anything. And then he engages in this really risky behavior to the point where Batman is acknowledging that he could have died. And I really would have almost considered that a suicide, that he's willing to risk his life in this state of euphoria. And I do find it to be very upsetting and disturbing, because while he experiences this sense of freedom, he has absolutely no control over himself.
Right. Batman wants to know more about this, but especially after Bruce Wayne encounters an employee by the name of Seymour Gray, who up to this point has always been scared of coming up to Bruce Wayne or talking out of turn or really saying anything about the being unhappy at work. He's just a very sort of quiet, fearful employee. That is until now, when he is saying anything and everything that he's ever wanted to say. Andrea, you even took issue with his final act before being escorted off by security at Wayne Enterprises. What does he end up doing?
Well, he storms into Bruce Wayne's office. And by the way, as a side note, Tim's there. It's summer session, or he's on summer vacation. He has some free time, so he's just hanging out in Bruce's office, and he's doing some acrobatic stuff on the chair. And of course, Batman scowls at this and tells him he should be studying, he should be hitting the books. And Tim makes some comment that, oh, right, I forgot I work with the most boring person in the world.
Right.
But who we meet here is Bruce Wayne's administrative assistant, who is in the room because she's helping him on something. And that's when this guy comes in, this employee, Mr. Gray. Not that Mr. Gray.
No,
unfortunately.
definitely not that Mr. Gray.
And he is quitting, and he's in the same way that the first guy we talked about was euphoric and lacking control of himself. This guy was also very free, didn't seem to have a filter, just said what was on his mind. And then he grabs Sarah, the administrative assistant, grabs her body and forces her to kiss him.
Yeah.
Or plants a kiss.
I wouldn't say that he forces her to kiss him. He kisses her forcibly.
But I want to mention that he grabs her body and then forces himself on her by kissing her.
Yes.
And she's resisting him, but he's holding her in place.
Right.
And the reason I have to describe it that way is that clearly that's not consensual, and she's upset about it, and she's resisting it and trying to get out of his grasp.
Yeah. And in the same way that the first gentleman was terrified of heights, we get the indication clearly this guy had been scared of ever saying anything, ever saying that he was unhappy at work. He was definitely scared of maybe even talking to girls because he is described as being a very quiet person normally. And now he is not only telling everyone just how dissatisfied he is with his job and his workplace, but he is also brazenly kissing this girl, which is something he obviously wouldn't normally do. So now Bruce is really interested. He ends up going through the guy's wallet, finds this card, for what is essentially a self-help motivational speaker type Tom Cruise in Magnolia kind of character.
He's almost doing this like motivational Tony Robbins type speech or lecture, but he wants to instill this idea in the participants or in the audience, and I'm guessing to recruit them for joining with him and buying this drug.
Yeah. Clearly, there's something going on, enough so that Bruce can't simply go as Bruce Wayne. He's got to put on a disguise, which is essentially just a different suit.
And he has like a little mustache.
The tiniest of mustaches. I mean, it was one of those, if you couldn't tell that was Bruce Wayne.
Which disappointed me because I know that he loves to get into disguise. And so...
He doesn't have time for that, man.
I guess not.
He doesn't have time. He's got to go check out what is happening to his employees, and what is potentially setting him up for a serious lawsuit. But he goes and investigates further, but is caught by the Scarecrow, is knocked unconscious, and is sort of fed this gas as well. As he's describing what this gas does to young Tim while in the Batwing, take a listen to this reaction.
This gas that takes away your fear, by any chance, did you breathe it?
Yes, but I can handle it.
Oh, yeah?
I had notes here. Child endangerment was one of the first things I wrote because little Tim is in the back of this plane as Batman is flying it recklessly, doing all sorts of unnecessary turns and moves that I think are...
Well, he's doing barrel rolls through the city.
But they're not necessary. I feel like he's only doing those things because he no longer feels that sense of fear, and now it's just exhilaration. It's just, complete elation, and he doesn't have that level of anxiety or control to keep him safe or to keep Tim safe.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But it's sort of showing us that that's what he's afraid of. Some of his deepest fears could simply be of endangering other people. Now, I don't buy that. I saw Batman the Animated Series. That man had no problem driving through Gotham City like a madman.
But Tim wasn't in the back seat when he was doing that.
Maybe he's fearful of putting Tim in danger. I don't know, but he nearly runs into another airplane. There's a lot of endangerment going on here, and I think what we're meant to glean from this is that Batman is fearful of putting Gothamites in danger, the citizens of Gotham. He wants to protect them, not endanger them. And here he has zero fear of this, so he will do anything and everything he needs to do to make that happen. And in fact, we don't even entirely know where it is he's going because he's just in the Batwing with Tim. And, they're going to go investigate, but there's no real reason to go speeding through the air of Gotham City. We now know what Batman is most afraid of, or do we? Because as the episode goes on, it's a pretty simple episode in terms of plot and continuity. So we're not going to go through scene by scene. As the episode goes on, Batman becomes significantly more aggressive. So much so that he nearly kills a man, the Guru, by hanging him out the window.
Well, I think that's important to talk about because Batman goes with Tim to, the lab, the offices where the Guru has these operations where he's fulfilling whatever Scarecrow's crazy plan is. And there, Batman goes to interrogate the Guru and find out what's going on and what's behind this. He confronts a number of these, suited henchmen who pull out guns. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a clear difference in the way that Batman approaches them. He faces them directly, he confronts them, walks toward them as they're pulling out their weapons. And Tim is frightened because he knows that this is really risky. Nonetheless, Batman continues to go forward and he dodges the bullets. He manages to be okay. But there is that sense, that same common behavior, that thread of recklessness and lacking any control or fear, lacking the fear, which then means that he's not mindful of his own sense of safety or Tim's safety, which really bothers me here, because it's one thing for him to be, I don't know, it's one thing for him to put his own life on the line, but he's also putting Tim's life on the line along the way.
When you say that it bothers you, though, do you mean that it bothers you like this is symptomatic of something, or are you simply saying that you are bothered by this moment in the show because the man has zero fear in his body whatsoever at this point? I mean, he did. Are
you saying that he's under the influence of this drug, so why would he behave any differently?
Correct. Yeah, he's not looking out for Robin. He has no fear, even as that pertains to other people.
Well, remember that this is interactive, that a person responds based on what their phobias and fears are. So the guy that had the fear of heights in the beginning of the episode, the first thing he did was go up on the ledges of these tall buildings to run around and experience euphoria. So in a way, one of the things we have to think about is how this toxin is interacting with Batman's psychology.
Right. He was afraid of putting Tim in jeopardy, and now he's not afraid of that.
Yes. His fear is losing other people.
Right.
Right. And so he is directly confronting that fear, but it's not in an adaptive way. It's not in a therapeutic way, the way that we would want him to confront those fears.
Right.
It's incredibly disturbing because he's literally putting Tim in danger.
Yeah. You're kind of saying that though, like he's making a choice. Like he's not making the choice. He is under that it's not a conscious decision.
You're saying I should be less judgmental of him.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Wait, this is the very first episode where you're saying I'm judgmental of Batman, and you're
because you're judging him as he's been drugged for something.
No, I get it, and I understand that, but I'm still upset by it.
Okay, all right, that's fair.
But here's where things get crazy. He manages to grab the guru, this inspirational speaker, the guy behind everything, and ties him up and hangs him at the ledge outside the window and begins to cut the rope and interrogates him. Of course, when the guru talks about what he knows and how, the Scarecrow is going to kill him, Batman's response is, well, death is death.
Death is death. Does it matter who administers it?
Which is something that Batman has said a number of times so far in the new Batman Adventures. Somehow or another, from the years of Batman the Animated Series and the Adventures of Batman and Robin to the new Batman Adventures, Batman has acquired the catchphrase, dead is dead, or death is death. I don't know why, but he is very keen on this now.
And he
has said it like 2 or 3 times.
And then he leaves, and the rope breaks, and Robin is left there to save this guy and hoist him back up. I think there's some element here where Batman is relying on Robin to figure it out and to secure the safety of this guy ultimately at the end of the day, but at the same time, again, extremely risky behavior.
Yeah. Now, something that I find interesting here is that once he's nearly crossed that line and Robin has to save the guru because Batman simply walks away, Robin ties Batman up. And, take a listen to the exchange.
You're out of control.
You don't know what you're talking about.
That gas has affected you more than you think.
I told you, I can handle it.
You can't! You're not even afraid to kill.
You're not even afraid to kill, Drea. That suggests that, to me anyway, it suggests that Batman only doesn't kill people because he's afraid of it. And now he's not afraid of it, so he's willing to do it. I've never seen, for as much as I'm not a Batman apologist, I've never seen Batman as simply not being willing to kill because he was afraid to do it.
I don't know that. I think we're taking it too literally from Tim. I think we have to understand it as the fear of losing control so much. You give into your hatred and your anger. You give into your violent tendencies to the degree that you let go and you kill somebody. And I think that has a lot to do with his fear of becoming the villain that he, the type of villain that he's going after, the type of criminal that he is dedicating his life to lock up and keep from harming others.
Right.
So I think it's about, you're fearful of harming others. You're fearful of harming others to the degree that you end their life, having more to do with his fear of losing control, his fear of understanding what's right and wrong.
Right. And he is clearly willing to kill, because not only did he hang the guru outside the window and actually leave him there to die, but he straight up killed a couple of alligators.
Oh, in that scene where he encounters,
Scarecrow, yeah, like he's attacked by these crocodiles or alligators, I'm not sure which. They roll him under. We suddenly see blood come up through, out of the water. Bruce Wayne emerges, and then a gator or croc bounces to the surface and just has the dead man's float just there. He killed those
he had
animals.
To.
Yeah.
He had to be, I mean, that was self-defense. He had to get out of the...
He didn't kill the shark when the Joker dropped him in the shark tank. There was no he didn't straight up murder that shark, or not even murder, but he didn't self-defense it to death.
Right. Well, that is the first scene where he's operating under the influence of the drug.
Right.
So we see that there is this potential, maybe chemically, there is something to say about the interaction between the brain's chemistry and this drug, because not only does he not have fear of the crocodiles, but he also has this like pumped up adrenaline type state where he's able to take down three pretty vicious crocodiles in a matter of moments. So,
you know what I love about this episode, though, is even though Robin ties Batman up and leaves him there, even though Batman tries to trick him into letting him go, Tim doesn't unleash him. He leaves him there on the rooftop. I actually like that Tim goes to take out the Scarecrow on his own and fails. He's knocked unconscious after a valiant effort, but come on, the kid's like 80 pounds. And a henchman knocks Tim unconscious. Batman still comes back and still tries to save the day. He acknowledges that Tim was right. He acknowledges that he's a bit out of control. He is chucking thugs off of the train left and right, through the subway train windows. I have no idea what they are hitting when they are thrown from those things. We only see the aftermath. We only see them on the ground sitting up, as if to suggest they're not dead.
The first guy that gets thrown out of the train, I'm pretty convinced he doesn't get up. I could be wrong, but
he's like kicked out of the train, and he falls backward onto the tracks, and we don't really see what happens to him. You're right.
Mm-hmm. He's dead.
Maybe
Batman straight up killed him.
Well, but Batman threw two men out the window, and they must have landed as hard, if not harder, than the first guy did, and they got up. So I'm willing to give that first guy the smallest of doubts that maybe he survived. It's not like, the guys who were crushed by the coin. in almost Gotham. These guys might have survived. But once again, we are shown what appears to be an ongoing theme. And it's that Batman Begins moment again, where Batman is with a villain, and they are leaning over a console of a vehicle that is spiraling toward something deadly. He did it with the Joker not too long ago. He has done it with other characters in the past. And once again, Batman is over the console, can't stop the train in time. I'm not going to kill you. But
the difference here is that he is going to kill the Scarecrow. He has his hands around his strange neck, non-neck. It's hard to tell what
I don't even
Scarecrow
know why he's got
has.
his hands. He doesn't even need to put his hands around it. He could just tighten the noose.
That's true.
And just tug on it.
That's true.
And done.
But he wants to do it with his bare hands,
He wants to
apparently.
feel it with his hands.
So he's pretty much strangling him, and little Tim is telling him, no, you have to stop. You can't do this. You can't kill him. And Batman actually tells him, no. And he hits Tim. He
backhands him,
knocks him down and is insistent.
Tell me that wasn't a Temple of Doom moment. Tell me that wasn't Indiana Jones.
I could see it.
Backhanding Short Round. I really wanted Robin to get up with the inhaler that it has the antidote in it and yell, Batman, Batman, I love you, wake up. Like, I really wanted that.
You got a version of that, which is where Tim perseveres and he does get the inhaler and he, or the antidote, and he sprays it into Batman's face, and Batman breathes it in and comes to and decides not to kill the Scarecrow. So it's really because of Tim's courage and insistence that somewhere in there Batman is still intact, that his moral compass is still somewhat to the degree that he can keep him from doing this horrific thing. And of course, the antidote is really important here because it allows the toxin to dissipate or to not be effective anymore. And of course, Batman is willing to save the Scarecrow. Now he's saving the Scarecrow's life.
Yeah. And he does. He saves the Scarecrow's life. As they exit the train falls and blows up or does whatever it is that the subway train does. And the entire thing comes to an end as you see Batman carrying the Scarecrow over his shoulder and Robin apologizing. But Batman says, don't apologize. You were right. You did what you needed to do. And Drea, something that you said immediately after watching this episode, I chuckled. I find funny. Your problem with the end of this episode is...
Batman actually doesn't apologize at the end.
That is true.
And he does so many things to Tim. He backhands him.
Yeah, I was going to say not the least of which is him backhanding him.
So he beats him up. I think the scene where Tim has tied up Batman and has said, I'm going to go get the Scarecrow and you need to stay here because you're under the influence. That was a really powerful moment because Batman even tries to manipulate Tim and say, you're right. I'm not altogether here. I'm compromised, but I can still help you and you should untie me. And it's so manipulative. And so I would say just really disturbing, the element of him trying to take advantage of Tim's fear, because that's essentially what he's trying to do. And Tim stands his ground and he says, you know what? I don't believe you. I'm going to keep you tied up. In that moment, Batman yells at him and it's very condescending and it's very abrupt. I immediately thought of what it's like for a parent or a caregiver who's under the influence and who snaps at a child. It was the same kind of interaction where he just lets it go and is pretty mean toward Tim. And at the end of this episode, there's no apology. There's no acknowledgement that I mistreated you. I know I was under the influence. I know that I wasn't in the best of states. I wasn't in the right mind, but I mistreated you and I'm sorry. And you did the right thing. And I trust you. None of that happened. It was, oh no, you don't have to apologize. Don't feel bad. You did something that you had to do, but that's it.
Yeah.
What was that?
It's funny. I think you are for the first time maybe seeing the Batman I've been seeing for 98 episodes. I think that you're looking at a character that it pains him to admit that he could be wrong. And he even says when under the influence, now granted he's trying to manipulate Tim, but says it's really hard for me to say this, but you're right. I was out of control.
So why do you think that Tim was apologizing at the end?
Well, he was apologizing because he tied his mentor up, his boss. He tied Batman up. He took matters into his own hands. And Batman simply said, don't apologize. You did the right thing. Mm-hmm. You saw what needed to be done and you did it. Again, it's sort of means to an end. It's Batman willing to do whatever it takes, short of killing someone, to catch villains and put them in Arkham or Blackgate or wherever. But he is acknowledging that Tim is now seeing right from wrong as it comes to procedural thing. You know, if I'm out of my element, if I am in any way compromised, you need to take me out. Good job. But he didn't say good job. He simply acknowledged, and you're right, he didn't apologize. But I think that's Batman. I don't think he's ever apologized to anyone for driving recklessly through Gotham City.
In the end, what needed to happen happened. So I could see Batman looking at this.
Mission successful.
Anyway, like we got what we needed to get done, and yeah, our mission was completed. And the ending, I think, is really important because Tim also says that he was really scared. And Batman, why? And this makes me a little bit upset. We realized that Batman was not scared through the majority of the episode. And I wish that there was a little bit more there, but he does tell Tim sometimes a little fear is a good thing. And I realize that he's talking about himself in that moment. And I think that's important to pay attention to and to lift up out of this entire episode, because the lesson for Batman is that the thing that he wants to use as a weapon, because remember what his goal is all around fear. Mm-hmm. This is why the Scarecrow is a real threat to him, because Batman wants to instill fear in the cowardly lot, right? So he wants to use fear as a weapon, and and
the Scarecrow successfully does it where Batman cannot.
Right. Well, no, the Scarecrow wants to take it away.
Well, in this episode, yes.
Right. And I think that's quite an interesting element too, because the Scarecrow points out when he's describing his plot to
the mayor
to pump the toxin into the tunnels and to kind of reveal what his true aim is here. He speaks of fear, or he speaks of not having fear as a huge threat to the city, because then people don't follow rules. They aren't going to be fearful of the consequences, and so he connects lack of fear to power, and I think that's important to note. But at the end of the episode, I think it's interesting that Batman identifies with the need to have a little bit of fear, and understanding that it's important for us to connect with fear so that we know when other people are not safe, when we're not safe, that the idea of protecting others operates with some element of fear. The idea that the adrenaline related to fear is what we need pumping through our bodies to get through some really difficult challenges. And I wish there was a little bit more articulated there, but I'm satisfied with the ending of that.
I mean, as they've always said, the fear is what prevents us from simply walking out into the middle of the street and getting hit by cars. It's the flight is necessary as a survival instinct. And to take that away, you end up getting the guy who is swinging around Gotham City in the beginning, who doesn't seem to care if he's going to die or not.
Right. And that's actually one of the things that we address in therapy early on. One of the things that I have specialized in is trauma, anxiety, and related conditions. And within the first session or two, we address the idea that fear is necessary. The goal of therapy is not to remove or eliminate all fear, all aspects of fear. We have to have some fear in us. We have to have some anxiety in us in order to recognize unsafe or risky situations, in order to motivate us to get out of those situations, in order to keep ourselves safe and to keep others safe when we see that others might be in danger. So it's one of the things that we address particularly early on in order to set expectations that the goal is not to eliminate fear. That would be a bad idea. We just want to better identify when that fear is out of our control, when it becomes so excessive that it interferes with our day-to-day life, and somewhat to the degree that we can transform that fear, that stress, that anxiety to energize us, to do good things in life, to be productive, to be positive, to be successful. And that last element is probably the most difficult part of it, but it really confronts fear in the face and it embraces fear in order for us to be able to just coexist with this thing that society has identified as something that's really scary. So I like that this episode reminds us that we should be scared once in a while and that it keeps us safe, and that even Batman should be scared once in a while. And for that, I completely sympathize with Batman, and I excuse every single thing he did in this episode.
Except you're the one who's the most
fine.
Unhappy with
it's
Batman.
It's totally fine. Oh, everything he did is totally fine.
All right. Coming up, we're going to analyze Drea and her need or fear of not apologizing for Batman. Okay, so we have a question for one of our longtime listeners, Leah. She asks, I have reason to believe that this is another instance of a past experience in series affecting a character's actions, such as we saw for Batman in Double Talk and Riddler in Riddler's Reform. I mean, it's Scarecrow trying to make the citizens of Gotham stop feeling afraid. That seems like a pretty sharp 180-degree turn to me. However, let us consider the last time we saw Dr. Crane, a little incident and person known as Lockup. Lyle Bolton, for all intents and purposes, scared the absolute crud out of the master of fear himself. Even if Jonathan was able to get his revenge by the end of that episode, I'm sure the trauma he faced by the chief of security's hand would stick with him for quite a while afterward. I suppose that would make my question, was this whole plot Crane trying to project himself onto the now fearless citizens of Gotham in an attempt to escape the terror he felt when Bolton was in charge of Arkham? What a great question. What do you think, Drea?
So is she saying that essentially the Scarecrow is trying to operate under the opposite of what he used to, like no anxiety,
right,
or no fear is now the weapon because he doesn't want to experience fear? And
yeah, right.
Is that what she's saying? But the other thing I hadn't even thought about was, did he use the toxin on himself?
Ooh.
So he
maybe that's
is
why
not
he is the way
experiencing
he.
fear.
Yeah, maybe that's why he is the way he is now, all Solomon Grundy like.
He apparently is still scared of the dentist.
Oh,
No, I'm just kidding. I think that's a great point, and I agree that this is a very different direction for him. That his entire identity, his character, is about imposing fear, about using fear and anxiety as not just a weapon, but as a tool to get what he's wanted. And we said this before, that he also was interested in different ways, in the different ways that he can manipulate human beings, and that he was often taking a grandiose perspective, that he believed he was so intelligent and scientifically advanced to the degree that he believed he could take advantage of and abuse human beings to get what he wanted in the end.
right.
And so I agree that in a way this is very different from what he used to do. At the same time, it's very possible that he's in a way he's experimenting with the absence of anxiety and fear.
And is that so different than what he was already doing as a scientist, experimenting with the induction of fear? Maybe he is now experimenting. Maybe he's just changed his science a little bit. Maybe he's gone a different route. Maybe he's still conducting experiments, but just in an opposite direction.
Well, ultimately, I think that a lot of his experimentation was about his own inner deep demons. That the idea that he could gain control and manipulate others was around the fact that he couldn't handle his own history of trauma, his own demons, his own anxiety. And so it was about gaining control. And so in that regard, yeah, I think it's very similar to what he used to do. What I think is absent in this episode is any real scientific advancement or any real solid, understandable aim that he has. I think in the past I've sort of felt sympathy and even some understanding for what he's doing, especially early on when we would see his journey from a university professor to going down a more destructive path.
Yeah.
I think that a little bit is lost here in the sense that I don't really get him the way that I used to. It could be that they drew him like, with this ghoulish
They made him
appearance.
entirely unrelatable.
Yeah, so it's I totally think that that's one of the aspects that creates a lot of distance and makes us feel like, well, that this is more of a simplified villain.
I do like the idea that we are provided an arc for Jonathan Crane, where he goes from being weakling to eventually, the last time we saw him, he is the victim, and now he has gone an entirely different route and has now become a nightmarish villain. And nightmarish, I don't know if that's even the right word, given that he's trying to take fear away from people. But it is interesting to think, as Leah points out, that the last time we saw him, he was being bullied by Lockup. But that brings me to my next thought, I guess. We've had a little bit of a question as to whether this is even Jonathan Crane behind this. I mean, he's never called Crane in the episode. Batman never says only Jonathan Crane could be behind this. Maybe this is Lockup. Maybe
What?
Maybe Lockup has taken on the mantle of Jonathan Crane after having been in Arkham. I mean, it would explain his bulk, his size, the noose around his neck now. Maybe Lockup is the new Scarecrow.
That is definitely a bit.
You don't know.
Oh, I don't know. That sounds a little bit.
I can't wait till the next
far-fetched
episode when we find out that Lockup is in fact Scarecrow. Join us next week. All right, maybe.
Wait, who's the kid that has Batman in his basement?
Little Sherwood?
So this could all be, that could be Sherwood. Maybe it's Sherwood.
Oh yeah, make the redhead the nightmarish, ghoulish Scarecrow figure now. All right, I appreciate that.
What's weird is that the Scarecrow no longer wants people to be scared of him. He doesn't want people to be scared. So therefore they wouldn't be scared of him.
Well, he doesn't, it's not even that he doesn't want him to be scared of him. I mean, you're right, but ultimately he just wants the rats that he's studying to kill each other. He wants the entire town to just go crazy with not being afraid of anything. It'd be mass hysteria if all of Gotham City just isn't scared of anything. So, I'm telling you, it's a study of an entirely different sort. What happens if you have an entire city that's no longer afraid? Which brings me to my ultimate question about Gotham City. What does it take for a city to just stop fearing things? Because you would think if any city would be like, look, we're over this, it would be Gotham City.
Well, it would become the status quo.
Exactly. They would no longer fear anything because it's just one more day in Gotham. Okay, so let's move on to our next question from one of our listeners, Megan, over at Facebook. She says, "Dear Andrea and Brian, I just wanted to say that I enjoyed the interview with Sam Humphries and was wondering if the two of you could talk more about some of the different types of methods of how to deal with high and low levels of stress and anxiety for the next episode, and maybe about what some of the easy and harder signs of recognizing them are. So what are some of these signs of anxiety and stress, and well, I guess fear would be obvious.
Right.
You know, your heart's are racing. But
yeah, the easier signs, I can talk about those first. Those are exactly the things that you're talking about. The physiological signs, like sweating excessively, your heart beating rapidly, the difficulty to breathe, your face getting very, very hot or feeling flushed, your body feeling very hot. Some people even describe like lower GI problems, stomach pain, the need to use the restroom, loss of control over some of your functions there. And I think that the cloudy mind is also something that really affects people in terms of their mind going blank or having so many intrusive thoughts that it's chaotic in their brain. The idea that they feel like they might be dying, they might be losing control, they might be going crazy. Those are some of the immediate thoughts that they have. And so for the most part, that physiological set of symptoms or signs is what I would consider like, yeah, those are the easiest things to recognize because they're happening in the moment. They send signals to your brain that something is wrong. And in my line of work, we relate that to an alarm system. We compare that to an alarm that's going off in your body telling you that something is wrong. It is equipped. You have a system in your body that's equipped to tell you something is going wrong. And you, Brian, mentioned fight or flight. That's exactly what it's telling you to do. Do you need to run out of the situation and get yourself to a place of safety? Do you need to gear up to fight and defend yourself? That's essentially what the body is preparing you to do. And that's why it feels so uncomfortable. It feels like you're in distress because you are.
And what about some of the harder signs then?
So some of the harder signs are more long-term in the sense that you might be having memory loss. You might be having difficulty with day-to-day tasks, like routine tasks that for in your typical day-to-day routine may be easy for you, but you're finding they're harder and harder to do. You're forgetting that you sent emails to people. You're forgetting whether you texted them. You're forgetting appointments. So some of the what we consider like cognitive elements of anxiety and stress.
Is that simply because you are not focusing on, even whether you realize it or not, you're not focusing on the task at hand, but you've got some part of
You're
your mind
distracted.
that is thinking about,
Yeah, it could be that you're distracted, or that that you have intrusive thoughts about whatever you're anxious about, and so that's keeping you from really focusing well. And over the long term, the signs that I would consider are more difficult to recognize are more global. So those would be getting physically ill, like having colds and flus more often than you're used to, or than any person should be experiencing. So your immune system is down. And there are studies that look at the prevalence or the frequency of getting ill, and folks that are stressed and get anxious are more likely to have weaker immune systems. So that's something that could connect a person to a history of or experiencing more anxiety and stress. Even interferences with some important things, relationships, occupational functioning, or your job functioning. If you're in school, your academic functioning, seeing some deficits in your academic, your expectations, or what you typically are capable of in terms of your schooling or your education. So those more global levels of functioning, those different areas of your life that are impacted in a negative way, those could be tied, those deficits could be tied to experiencing stress or anxiety. And a lot of times other people will point out to us, are you doing okay? You've missed these appointments with me, or I haven't seen you in a while, or you seem to be isolating yourself. You're not taking care of yourself. Those are signs that maybe something is introducing distress to your life, and so you may want to consider whether you're experiencing anxiety and whether you need to get maybe a professional assessment.
So then let's talk about the ways that you would defeat some of these symptoms and your long-term anxiety, Drea. What are the best ways, once you've recognized that you have problems with stress or anxiety, to take care of them?
Well, remember that I said that we have this built-in alarm system. So I want to go back to that and thinking of the brain as being responsible for that physiological stress response. So as you can imagine, one of the things that we want to do is to calm the brain down. And you can do that by calming the body. So some of the most common ways to address anxiety and stress involve some physical or physiological techniques. And some of the easier ones include breathing and relaxation techniques or strategies. So in terms of breathing, I simply mean sitting down or lying down somewhere and practicing some very focused abdominal breathing for stretches of time, 10, 15 minutes. Focusing your mind on a soothing sound or a soothing image, or even just a word or a phrase you can tell yourself over and over. Some people turn to prayer or some kind of repeated mantra or soothing poem that they repeat to themselves. And believe it or not, as simple as that sounds, that can provide some more immediate calming of the body, which in turn does impact the response system or that alarm system. And by the way, the alarm system is totally necessary, again, to tell us when something is wrong and we have to get ourselves to a safe space, to get ourselves out of danger or to protect someone else. But oftentimes that alarm system goes off just like any, fire alarm or car alarm that can go off unexpectedly and usually in a faulty way. So we compare the alarm system in the body to that faulty, random, hey, it just went off, and it doesn't mean that someone's actually breaking into your car. Maybe it was just bumped and it reacted, right? So in thinking of that, there are lots of opportunities then to implement a relaxation technique, like a breathing technique, like the kinds I've just mentioned. And there are also more physical techniques like doing progressive muscle relaxation, which you can actually find online. If you just Google progressive muscle relaxation, you'll find lots of scripts and different techniques that come up that demonstrate how to tense up your muscles and release or loosen your muscles so that you can experience that physical sense of calmness. For me, I would prefer to do some physical activities that actually increase my heart rate, like aerobics or cycling or CrossFit or running. So something that is exhilarating, but that I have control over. And so it reminds me that I can manage the feelings in my body by doing those things and implementing those activities, and sort of teaching my brain that the reason my body's heightened, the reason why the alarm system's activated is because I'm doing something to it. I'm doing something very healthy to it. And that can kind of retrain your brain to acknowledge that you're in control of it. And yes, sometimes you feel a sense of heightened physiological reactions, that feeling of rapid heartbeat and sweating and stress, and you can almost transform those feelings to euphoria or relaxation or success because you've just run 3 miles, So it's really about interpretation of the body and gaining more management or control of the body.
There you go, Megan. Thank you very much for contacting us. If you have any questions or comments you want addressed on the show, you can also contact us anytime. We'll give you that contact information here at the end of the show. But up first, Drea, what did you think of this episode?
I loved this episode.
I thought you might.
This is one of my favorites because there's, of course, a lot of psychology here. We're talking about the importance of anxiety and fear, and that we need some anxiety to keep ourselves safe and to take care of others. And this is a clear example of Batman stepping over the line and mistreating somebody in his life because he thought that he could control it and manage it, and he was wrong. So I think there's lots of lessons there. I appreciate the scene where Batman is tied up because I think that I
think we all know why you appreciate that scene.
Above and beyond that, when we see Batman tied up, we think a lot of things. But what I'm thinking about is the metaphor that we need to turn to other people sometimes because we need them to keep us in check. So when he's tied up, he's saying he wants to get out of the feeling of being trapped and confined, and he wants to lose control. He wants to step over the line, and he wants to get into that moral gray area. And someone in his life who cares about him is telling him to stay in control and actually keeping him tied up under control so that he doesn't get himself into trouble. And I think that that's a metaphor for what happens to us a lot of times when we're confused and we feel out of control and we want to do something reckless and we want to do something impulsive, and someone in our life steps in and says, you're not yourself. You have to take care of, your mind, your body, whatever. And I'm here to remind you of what's important to you. And I think that in this scene that allows us to see that play out in a really important way.
Love it.
What about you? So did you like this episode?
Loved it. I'm still not convinced that the Scarecrow is still Jonathan Crane.
That's fair.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what, if any, maybe repercussions or if there's any residual effects of this gas on Batman. Maybe we see him continue to maybe struggle with where the line is, or maybe he compensates or overcompensates in a completely different direction where he holds back even further because
he doesn't trust himself.
If you are correct and what he fears is that line, maybe he consciously takes a couple of steps back, and that would be interesting.
I agree.
I'm going to go ahead and tell everyone what it is we're doing next week. You are currently listening to the 99th episode of the Arkham Sessions. Next episode will be number 100. We're going to do a little something special for episode 100. Drea, you and I, we're going to start talking about the most popular toy in the world and how it relates to Batman. We are going to do an episode analyzing the Lego Batman movie.
Yay! That means we have to see it again.
Yeah, whatever excuse you need to see that movie again. But there is a lot to talk about in the Lego Batman movie. We feel like we've given you guys maybe enough time to go check this movie out. If you haven't, we are forewarning you, you've got a week to see it. And for episode 100, we're going to cover the Lego Batman movie. Drea, until then, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you?
I'm on Twitter at Arkham Asylum Doc and Instagram, Arkham Asylum Doc. I have a webpage, underthemaskonline.com. And we have the Arkham Sessions on Facebook as well as on Twitter at the Arkham Sessions. You
can also find me. I'm at bward028. I highly recommend that you go check out our family over at Fanbase Press at fanbase_press, or you can go to fanbasepress.com and check out our schedule for WonderCon, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks. So you need to come see us there in Anaheim, California for WonderCon. We have a panel. At some point in time, you will be able to get that schedule over at Fanbase Press. So keep an eye out there. It won't be up yet. We're not allowed to post it yet. But once we are allowed to post it, that's where you'll find it. And you should check out their website. While you're there, why don't you also check out all the comics they've got and the other podcasts. Some amazing stuff over at fanbasepress.com. Until next time, I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Diddly-um-bum-bum, diddly-um-bum-bum.